My father stole the business I built and wanted me to work for him. My grandpa used to say the best cure for heartache was a full tank and an open road, plus a couple of wrenches in your hand, even if you had no clue what to turn with them. That's how my story started. Folks, I'm Alex, and before Benson Customs became a thing, I was basically a walking disaster with tools. I remember trying to fix my parents' washing machine when I was 15. The result? Soap suds reaching the ceiling, and a call to the fire department, who showed up not to put out a fire, but to laugh at the foam monster I created. My dad called me a self-taught mechanic, but there wasn't much warmth in those words, more like he was describing a particularly stubborn rash. The real love affair with metal and grease started with my grandpa on his old farm in Texas. That smell, motor oil, gasoline, wet earth after rain. That was my happiness cocktail right there. He didn't just teach me to turn bolts. He taught me to feel a machine, to hear its pulse, to understand its soul. Every machine has a soul, Alex. He'd tell me while patting his ancient pickup truck that looked like it had seen dinosaurs roam the earth. Your job is to find that soul and breathe new life into it. Grandpa's truck was his beat-up Chevy that probably should have been declared legally dead in 3 states, but somehow it kept running. He'd spend hours under that hood, not because it needed fixing, but because he loved the conversation. Yeah, conversation. He talked to that truck like it was his drinking buddy at closing time. After technical college and a few years getting my hands dirty at budget auto shops around Houston, I finally felt ready to chase something bigger. My apartment was basically a glorified storage unit with plumbing, and my tools were scattered between my car trunk and various corners of that shoebox. That's when desperation dressed up as inspiration knocked on my door. Either garage or I sleep in my car. The choice seemed pretty obvious, at least to me. My dad's garage was massive, empty, and just sitting there like a concrete cathedral waiting for worship. When I pitched the idea of starting my own shop, Dad's reaction surprised me. His eyes lit up like he'd just spotted a $20 bill on the sidewalk. "Sure, son," he said, leaning back in his recliner. "I've got bills to pay on this place anyway. Might as well put to good use." That garage transformed into my temple faster than you could say carburetor. I practically moved in there, sleeping on an old couch that had seen better decades, and dreaming in the language of engine revs and wrench clicks. My first real customer was my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez, who brought me her late husband's 1969 Camaro. Thing hadn't run in 8 years, but she wanted it purring again for her grandson's graduation. 2 weeks later, that Camaro was breathing fire and turning heads. Word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Every car that rolled into what we started calling Benson Customs got a piece of my soul welded into its frame. This wasn't just mechanical work. This was resurrection, American style. Within 6 months, I had a waiting list longer than a CVS receipt. That's when the business talk started. Everyone kept telling me to register the company in my name. Smart advice, right? But then Dad would get this concerned look, like he was breaking bad news about Santa Claus. "Whoa there, son," he said one evening, shuffling through some papers at the kitchen table. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Your credit history's still pretty banged up from that student loan mess." He had a point. My credit score looked like a batting average from a really bad season. "I'm your father. We're family," he continued, that reassuring dad voice in full effect. "This way's safer for everyone. You handle what you do best, the wrenches and grease, and I'll take care of the business side. We're partners, you and me, just temporary until you get your financial house in order." The way he said partners felt different than how I heard it, but I bought it anyway. Hook, line, and sinker. The paperwork got filed with Dad's name on everything that mattered. I became an employee of my own dream, pulling a decent salary while all the serious profits flowed into family accounts that Dad controlled tighter than state secrets. Temporary formalities, I told myself. After all, blood's thicker than motor oil, right? Benson Customs started making serious noise in the Texas car scene. We became that wild, indefinable Texas miracle that every gearhead with sick engine would talk about. People drove from 3 states away because they'd heard about that crazy mechanic from Texas who could turn scrap metal into candy. I remember our first big break at the Dallas Classic Car Show. We displayed this Ford Mustang we'd completely brought back from the dead. And I mean, this thing was more rust than metal when we started. The crowd went absolutely nuts. I stood there next to my baby, chest puffed out like a proud papa, watching people's jaws drop and cameras flash. Then Dad grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the crowd, his voice booming through the speakers. "Welcome to the Benson family business. This is what happens when you combine traditional American craftsmanship with smart investment strategies." Notice something missing from that speech? Yeah, my name never came up. Not once. The kid who'd spent 3 months rebuilding that engine with his bare hands might as well have been invisible. I tried to tell myself he was just excited, caught up in the moment. But something in his eyes, this weird little spark of ownership, made my stomach twist in ways that had nothing to do with the gas station breakfast burrito I'd eaten. That feeling got stronger when I suggested upgrading our old hydraulic lift. "Alex, you're a mechanic, not a businessman," he said, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Don't mess with stuff you don't understand. Leave the big decisions to me." Those words had teeth, and they left bite marks. The customers kept coming. Classic cars, muscle cars, even some oil executive's Ferrari that he'd somehow managed to flood during a Texas thunderstorm. Each project was like solving a mechanical puzzle while performing surgery. I lived for that moment when a dead engine would cough back to life under my hands. We were pulling in serious money by then. 5-figure restorations were becoming normal, and our reputation stretched from Houston to Oklahoma City. But late at night, when the garage was quiet except for the occasional settling metal sounds, doubt would creep in like oil through worn seals. I'd catch Dad looking at financial reports with his satisfied expression, like he was reviewing his personal stock portfolio. When I'd ask about expanding or upgrading equipment, he'd always find a reason to say no. "Cash flow, son. We need to be smart about this." Then came the moment that should have been my wake-up call. Mrs. Chun, a wealthy collector from Austin, paid us $12,000 cash for restoring her husband's Corvette Stingray. I watched Dad pocket that money like it was his personal tip jar. "This all goes into the business account, right?" I asked him that evening. "Of course, Alex," he replied without looking up from his newspaper. "Family business. Family account. You trust your old man, don't you?" I did trust him. That was the problem. My girlfriend Lisa tried to warn me once over dinner at Denny's. She said Dad looked at me funny when I talked about future plans, like I was discussing someone else's property. "You're being paranoid," I told her, cutting into my grand slam. "Family's family. He's just looking out for me." She gave me this look that said I was denser than a brick wall, but she dropped it. I wish she hadn't. The workshop became my second skin. I knew every tool's location, every quirk of our equipment, every shortcut that could save time without cutting quality. Customers started requesting me specifically. The crazy mechanic who talks to cars and makes miracles happen. That reputation felt better than any trophy could. But there were signs I was too blind to see. Like how Dad started scheduling client meetings without me, or how he'd take calls in his office with the door closed, speaking in hushed tones about profit margins and expansion opportunities. When I'd ask about these conversations, he'd wave me off. "Just boring business stuff. Son, nothing that concerns the shop floor." The shop floor. That's what I'd become. Shop floor personnel in my own dream. One afternoon, while I was rebuilding a transmission, I overheard Dad on the phone with someone about opening a second location. My ears perked up like a dog hearing an opener. "Yeah, the boy's got talent," he was saying. "Real gift with engines. But he doesn't understand the business side. Probably better that way. Keeps him focused on what he does best." Not my son. Not even Alex. Just a boy. Like I was a wrench that happened to breathe. That one stung worse than a slip socket to the knuckles. Life was perfect on the surface. The American dream cruising at 70 miles per hour on a straight Texas highway. Money was flowing. Customers were happy. And my name was getting around the car community. But Grandpa's voice kept echoing in my head like a warning bell. "If something seems too good to be true, Alex, it probably is." I just didn't know yet that trust could be more expensive than the finest Italian leather seats. Or that family business meant something entirely different to Dad than it did to me. But right then, in that perfect moment before everything changed, all I knew was the sweet smell of gasoline and the warm feeling of trust. I had no idea I was about to learn that the most expensive lessons in life don't come with price tags. They come wearing familiar faces and speaking in voices you've trusted since childhood. And while I was tightening bolts and tuning carburetors, the storm clouds were already forming behind me. I just hadn't looked up yet. But life has a way of making you face the weather, whether you're ready or not. Coming back from that Florida parts hunting nightmare, all I could think about was upgrading our shop with some shiny new equipment. Instead, I walked straight into my personal war zone. I'd spent a week chasing down rare parts for a 1967 Ford Mustang in the swamplands of Florida, dodging alligators and shady dealers who looked like they'd sell their own grandmothers for scrap metal. Came home exhausted, but buzzing with ideas about hydraulic lifts and diagnostic computers. That's when I got the text from Dad. Family meeting tonight. Important business stuff. Walking into that kitchen felt like entering a courtroom where I was both the defendant and the evidence. Dad sat at our old oak table wearing that same serious expression he'd used when explaining why Santa couldn't bring me a pony for Christmas. Next to him sat my brother Damon, sporting this smug grin like he'd just won the lottery and I'd lost my ticket. The air was thick enough to cut with a socket wrench. Dad dropped a manila folder on the table like he was dealing cards in Vegas. The papers inside looked official, scary official. My stomach started doing backflips before he even opened his mouth. "Alex, we need to talk about the future of Benson Customs," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your credit situation, it's really become a problem. We've decided that Damon should take full control of the business." Time stopped. The clock on the wall might as well have been broken. I felt like someone had just told me my dog died, my truck was totaled, and my favorite fishing spot had been turned into a shopping mall all in the same sentence. "Dad, I built this whole thing." I protested, feeling heat rise in my chest like steam from an overheated radiator. "You said yourself that without me, everything would fall apart." "You did good work, Alex," he replied, his voice taking on that patronizing tone parents use when explaining why vegetables are important. "But this is business. You have talent, sure, but that doesn't mean you're ready to lead. I did what was best for the family. Your brother understands numbers better than you do. Starting tomorrow, you work as a hire mechanic. Regular employee wages. Regular employee wages. In my own shop, built with my own hands and sweat." "So that's it? I'm just some hired wrench turner now? This is my dream, my work. We agreed we were partners. You promised you'd transfer ownership when my credit improved." Dad's expression didn't change. Cold as December morning concrete. "Promise, son? Where's your paperwork? Where's the agreement? This is our family business. You just did the work. Good work, but still just work. This is our decision now." Our decision. Like I was some stranger who'd wandered in off the street asking for handouts. My world built on trust crumbled faster than a rusted-out frame hitting a speed bump. Every promise, every handshake, every time he'd call me partner, all of it evaporated like morning dew on hot asphalt. I was getting kicked to the curb like a busted alternator. The cruel math hit me all at once. For months, Dad had been telling me the big profits needed to go toward expansion and equipment upgrades. Sure, I was getting decent pay, better than most mechanics, but it was deliberately modest compared to what we were actually bringing in. I'd managed to save about $5,000 by cutting back on everything from coffee to cable TV, but those savings wouldn't last long when I was suddenly back to basic mechanic wages. Even my favorite work gloves, the leather ones I bought with my first paycheck from Grandpa's farm, were technically company property now. For 2 days after that meeting, I just sat in my apartment staring at the wall. Didn't touch a tool. Didn't eat anything that required more effort than opening a can. The betrayal felt like food poisoning. Everything inside me was toxic and needed to come out, but the process was going to hurt. Then I remembered something Grandpa once told me while we were fixing his old tractor. "Son, when life knocks you flat, You can either stay down and count ceiling tiles, or get up and start swinging back. I didn't go down without a fight, though. Spent the next week running between every lawyer's office I could afford, which wasn't many. The answer was always the same, delivered like a medical diagnosis with no cure. Without ownership documents. Alex, you can't prove anything. Everything's registered to your father, clean as a whistle. You signed employment agreements, not partnership papers. You were hired help. Hired help. In my own dream. That lesson got hammered into my skull harder than a stubborn lug nut. Trust, when money's involved, needs to be backed up by paperwork. Handshake deals with family can be the most expensive contracts you'll never sign. The eviction from my own life came swift and brutal. Worse than when I'd totaled my first car, because at least that could be fixed. I lost access to business accounts, tools I considered mine, equipment I'd maintained like my own children. I had those $5,000 in savings, but they wouldn't stretch far paying city rent on what I now understood were deliberately kept low wages. I had to find something cheaper to make my money last while I figure out what came next. From decent apartment to whatever I could afford in one family meeting. The search for something I could afford led me through neighborhoods that Google Maps probably marked as abandoned all hope. Found a tiny efficiency apartment above a Mexican restaurant where the smell of grease was constant, but at least it was food grease, not motor oil. The landlord, Carlos, took pity on me when I explained my situation. You look like good people in bad situation, he said in broken English, handed me keys to what he called the apartment, but was really more like a large closet with plumbing. You fix my delivery truck, sometimes. We call it even on deposit. That truck became my lifeline. A beaten-up Ford with more personality than most people I knew. Carlos would bring me tacos in exchange for keeping his business rolling, literally. It wasn't much, but it was honest work between two guys who understood that sometimes life kicks you in the teeth and you just have to keep chewing. I started picking up whatever work I could find. Fixed lawn mowers for suburban dads who thought engine trouble could be solved with harder pulling. Helped little old ladies whose cars made noises that sounded like dying cats. Even spent a weekend rebuilding the engine on a teenager's Honda that had been held together by prayer and bumper stickers. $5 here, 20 there. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The worst part wasn't the money or the living conditions. It was understanding how completely I'd been played. Dad hadn't just stolen my business. He'd been systematically underpaying me while making me think it was all for the greater good. Every time I'd suggested upgrading my salary, he'd point to some equipment purchase or expansion plan that needed the money first. Family's supposed to be your foundation, but sometimes family can be the earthquake that brings down everything you've built. Damon called once, about 3 weeks after the takeover. Probably expected me to come crawling back, begging for my old job. Instead, he got an education in what burn bridges sound like. "Hey, Alex," he said, trying to sound casual. "Dad wants to know if you consider coming back. Business is slower than expected without your magic touch." I let that hang in the air for about 10 seconds before responding. "Tell Dad I'm busy building something new. Something that won't disappear in a family meeting." The silence on his end was worth more than any paycheck they'd ever given me. For the first time since this whole mess started, I didn't feel like his little brother anymore. I felt like a stranger calling back from a different life. Late at night, lying on that secondhand mattress in my shoebox apartment, I'd stare at the water stains on the ceiling and plan. Not revenge. That's too expensive and takes too much energy. But success. Real success. The kind that doesn't need anyone's permission or approval. Every setback was just data. Every closed door was information about which way not to go. I remember walking past my old shop one evening and realizing I'd left behind my favorite 17mm wrench, the one from my first day with Grandpa. All that pain, all that betrayal, and it came down to one stupid piece of metal. But then I realized those words Grandpa taught me were worth more than any wrench ever made. "Alex, never give up. Even when the whole world against you, remember you've got 2 hands and a brain." That's more than most people know what to do with. Carlos became my first real friend in this new life. He'd sit with me in the evenings, sharing stories about his own journey from Mexico to Texas, building something from nothing with just determination and elbow grease. In Mexico, I have nothing, he told me one night over cheap beer and leftover carnitas. In America, I have truck, restaurant, family. Sometimes you must lose everything to find what you really have. His wisdom hit different than Grandpa's, but it carried the same weight. Both men had learned that what you build with your own hands can't be taken away by paperwork or family meetings. I didn't know where I was heading, but I knew exactly where I'd never return. And most importantly, I knew that fixing engines was the one thing that belonged to me completely. No one could steal my knowledge, my passion, or my ability to breathe life into dead metal. My revenge was going to smell like gasoline and taste like success. They'd taken my shop, but they couldn't take my soul. The real Alex Benson was just getting started. My new life looked like a scene from a low-budget movie, but at least I was a director this time. Living above Carlos's restaurant came with its own soundtrack. Sizzling meat, mariachi music, and the occasional domestic dispute from the apartment next door. My workspace was basically a corner of the alley behind a building where Carlos let me set up a makeshift shop under a rusted metal awning that looked like it had survived at least 3 hurricanes. Not exactly the Ritz, but it was mine. Those first weeks were a real test of creativity. Limited space, no proper equipment, and tools that I'd managed to salvage from my old life scattered around like survivors of shipwreck. I remember trying to work on an old Buick without a lift, stacking concrete blocks, and praying to every St. Carlos had taught me about. Grandpa would have laughed his butt off, then said something like, "Good thing you got blocks, son. It's all about results, not presentation." I had plenty of blocks, but not much else. Still, Grandpa's voice kept echoing in my head about making candy from nothing. My shop might have been tiny, but it had something my dad's fancy setup never had. My soul was actually in it. The work that came my way wasn't exactly glamorous. From potential Maseratis to gas-powered lawn mowers, my reputation was becoming so diverse I could have opened my own mini-mart of mechanical services. To survive, I took on everything that rolled, walked, or limped through my alley. Fixed lawn mowers for weekend warriors who thought engine problems could be solved by yanking the cord harder. Helped little old ladies whose cars sounded like they were dying slow, painful deaths. Even spent an afternoon wrestling with Mrs. Patterson's toaster that had apparently declared war on bread. It was funny and sad at the same time, but every appliance I brought back to life gave me this feeling that I could still create something meaningful. This was my reboot, collecting myself piece by piece, turning desperation into determination, one wrench turn at a time. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. Sometimes help arrives when you least expect it, usually making enough noise to wake the dead. One afternoon, while I was trying to convince a lawnmower engine that sounded like a cat being dragged through gravel to actually cut grass, this beat-up pickup truck rumbled into my alley. The truck looked like it had seen more wars than a history textbook. Out stepped this elderly guy, Mr. Bo. He introduced himself, Vietnam vet, judging by the patch on his jacket and the way he carried himself. He watched me work for about 10 minutes, not saying a word, just observing like he was studying a puzzle he'd seen before. "My neighbor Eddie told me about you. He finally said that slight Texas drawl making everything sound like wisdom. Said you fixed his transmission last week. May it purr like a kitten. Also said you're working miracles in a space smaller than most people's closets. You remind me of myself back in the day. Son, I can see you got fire in you. Fire needs room to grow." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys that looked like they could unlock half of Texas. Got an empty hangar on my property. He said, dangling those keys like they were the solution to every problem I'd ever had. You can use it till you get back on your feet. Only thing I ask is you don't run off my skunks. They were here first. That hangar was massive, better than anything I could have imagined, certainly better than my alley operation. High ceilings, concrete floors, enough space to work on multiple cars at once. It wasn't just a building. It was a second chance wrapped in corrugated metal and possibility. Mr. Bo became more than just a landlord. He'd stop by with coffee and stories about rebuilding engines in Vietnamese jungles with nothing but spare parts and stubbornness. His philosophy was simple. If it's broken, you fix it. If it can't be fixed, you make it into something else useful. That old-school American ingenuity ran in his blood like motor oil. Then came the challenge that would change everything. Mr. Bow rolled up one morning with what he generously called a car, but was really more like a rust sculpture that had once dreamed of being a 1967 Ford Mustang. "Take this Heat for $500, Alex," he said with that mischievous grin veterans get when they're about to test your character. Engine's long gone. Been sitting in my field for 15 years. Want it looking like new, or better than new, but running on electricity instead of gas. Figure if there's no engine anyway, might as well make it interesting. I looked at him, then at the car, then back at him. The math didn't make sense in any universe I knew. "Mr. Bow, this is going to cost $12,000 minimum." I told him honestly. Parts, labor, the electrical conversion. It's going to be expensive. I know that, son, but you take it for $500 and make magic happen. I'll front you the money for parts and materials. You can pay me back when it's done. You can do it, can't you? I accepted that challenge faster than you could say carburetor. This wasn't about money. This was about proving something to myself. Proving I could take the worst situation and turn it into something beautiful. 3 months in, I was literally building that car from scraps. Spent weekends at junkyards looking for treasure in other people's trash. Found parts that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did when I sweet-talked them into cooperation. The electric conversion was the crazy part. This was before Tesla made electric cool. I was basically a mad scientist trying to marry 1960s muscle with 21st century technology. YouTube tutorials, electrical forums, and a lot of trial and error that occasionally resulted in impressive light shows when I got the wiring wrong. Pure insanity, but it was my kind of insanity. That's when something unexpected happened. Something that didn't smell like gasoline or rust, but felt like hope walking on 2 legs. One afternoon while I was elbow deep in the Mustang's electrical system, this woman appeared in my peripheral vision. Emma, Mr. Bow's daughter. She was an artist, and I could tell because she looked at everything like she was seeing colors and possibilities that other people missed. She started bringing me coffee during my marathon work sessions. Sometimes she'd just sit on an old oil drum and watch me work, sketching in this worn leather notebook she carried everywhere. Emma didn't just bring me coffee. She brought silence that felt like peace, not loneliness. With her, I didn't have to prove anything. "You don't just fix cars, Alex," she said one evening as I was installing the electric motor. "You're giving them second lives. It's like painting, but with wheels and horsepower." Her words hit different than anything I'd heard before. We'd talk for hours about art, mechanics, life philosophy, the intersection of creativity and function. She saw beauty in things most people would throw away. I showed her how engines breathe, how electrical systems were like nervous systems, how every car had its own personality. She didn't know it, but every time she looked at that wreck and saw potential, I started believing I wasn't a wreck myself. Emma was the one who suggested documenting the Mustang project. She had this theory that people love watching transformation stories, whether it's a house flip or a life makeover. Why not film the whole process? She asked while helping me organize parts one weekend. Show people how you bring dead things back to life. What's the worst that could happen? Nobody watches it, and you're exactly where you started. She had a point. Rock Bottom has excellent Wi-Fi, and at least if I failed publicly, it might be entertaining for somebody. We started filming with her old camera, nothing fancy. Just me talking through what I was doing while she captured the process. Emma had this artistic eye that made even my grease-stained hands look purposeful on camera. From junk to jewel, Mustang Resurrection, we called it. Sounded better than watch this guy probably electrocute himself while trying to build a car. The first video was rough around the edges. My explanations were half coherent. Emma was still learning the technical aspects, and the sound quality was questionable at best. But there was something authentic about it that you couldn't fake or manufacture. I wasn't trying to be YouTube famous. I just wanted to show Mr. Bow the progress, and maybe prove to myself that I could document something meaningful instead of just living in isolation. That first video got maybe 50 views in the first week, mostly from Emma's art school friends and a few random car enthusiasts who'd stumbled across it. But those 50 people seemed genuinely interested in what we were doing. The comments were encouraging. People wanted to know about the electrical conversion, where I'd found certain parts, what challenges I was facing. Real questions from real people who appreciated the work. So we kept filming. Every major milestone, every setback, every small victory in the slow resurrection of that Mustang. Emma's camera work got better. My explanations became clearer, and something started building that neither of us had anticipated. A community of people who believed in second chances, whether for cars or people. By month 4, the Mustang was finally more machined than rust. The electric motor purred like a satisfied cat. The bodywork was coming together. And the whole project was starting to look less like insanity and more like innovation. Mr. Bow would check in periodically, offering advice or just sitting quietly while I worked. His presence was like having Grandpa nearby again. That steady, reassuring energy of someone who'd seen enough of life to know that most problems were solvable with patience and the right approach. Working in that hangar with Emma documenting the process felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. No corporate politics, no family drama, just me, some tools, and a project that demanded everything I had to give. The videos were getting more views each week. Not viral numbers, but steady growth from people who genuinely cared about craftsmanship and restoration. Comments started coming from mechanics, artists, even a few engineers who appreciated the electric conversion approach. Late at night, after Emma had gone home and the hangar was quiet except for the settling sounds of metal cooling down, I'd step back and look at what we were creating. Not just a car, but something bigger. A story about resilience, about not letting other people define your worth, about building something meaningful from the wreckage of disappointment. The Mustang was becoming more than transportation. It was becoming proof that everything broken could be made beautiful again, that innovation could come from desperation, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to stay down. I had no idea that little camera and those rough videos were about to change everything. But that's the thing about second chances. They don't announce themselves with fanfare. They just show up when you're finally ready to do the work. My life changed faster than I could repaint an old bumper. The video exploded, and I went from scrappy mechanic to internet sensation overnight. It started innocently enough. Emma and I had been documenting the Mustang restoration for weeks, posting videos that got maybe 100 views each. Decent engagement from car enthusiasts and a few curious souls who appreciated the craftsmanship. Then we uploaded the final episode, the first startup of that electric Mustang. The sound it made wasn't the rumble of a classic V8. It was a smooth, almost sci-fi that somehow felt both futuristic and nostalgic. The camera caught my face when that motor first turned over. Pure joy mixed with disbelief that we'd actually pulled it off. That video caught fire faster than spilled gasoline near a welding torch. First hundreds of views, then thousands, then the numbers started climbing so fast I thought YouTube's counter was broken. By the end of the week, we were sitting at 500,000 views and climbing. The comments section exploded like a parts catalog had been hit by a tornado. This guy's a genius. Real American ingenuity. I wanted to fix my car. People were sharing stories about their own restoration projects, asking technical questions, demanding more content. I'd wake up, check my phone, and watch those numbers climb like a slot machine hitting jackpot after jackpot. Emma would find me staring at the screen with this dumb grin, not quite believing what was happening. You realize people are calling you the electric car whisperer now, right? She said one morning, scrolling through comments while I made coffee in Mr. Bow's kitchen. Half the automotive forums are going crazy trying to figure out your electrical setup. Mr. Bow was loving every minute of it. He'd sit in his old recliner with his laptop, reading comments out loud and laughing like he'd just heard the best joke of his life. Listen to this one, Alex. He'd say, adjusting his reading glasses. This fella from Germany wants to know if you'll ship a car overseas. Germany, you've gone international. Son. But success has a way of attracting attention from all the wrong places, too. That's when the phone calls started. The first one came on a Tuesday morning while I was working on a 1970 Chevelle that a collector had shipped from California. My phone rang, and I almost didn't answer because I was elbow deep in an electrical harness that looked like it had been designed by someone with a serious grudge against logic. Alex, son, came Dad's voice through the speaker, loud enough to wake the dead and twice as enthusiastic. I'm so proud of you. We always knew you had talent. I nearly dropped my phone into the engine bay. Always knew? Seriously? Where was that confidence when I was sleeping on a mattress that had seen better decades? The conversation was awkward as a three-wheeled shopping cart. Dad kept talking about how the family had always supported my dreams, how he'd always believed in my potential. I listened, said the right words, and hung up feeling like I'd just been visited by a ghost who was trying to rewrite history. Damon called the next day. The conversation was even weirder. Alex, you've got to tell me how you did this, he said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. We're family, right? Maybe we could collaborate on something. Pool our resources. Their jealousy was so thick you could have used it to lubricate engine parts. I just smiled and gave them the standard social media response. Thanks for the support. Appreciate the kind words. Talk soon. Then came the day they actually showed up, in person, at my hangar. I was working on a Chevelle when I heard familiar voices outside. My stomach dropped like a transmission, hitting concrete. Through the hangar doors walked Dad and Damon, looking less confident than I'd ever seen them. They stood there taking in the setup. The professional lighting Emma had installed for filming, the organized tool stations, the cars in various stages of restoration. Their eyes lingered on everything like they were calculating value. Alex, we need to talk. Dad began, his voice softer than I remembered, almost pleading. We're having problems. Benson Customs is struggling. Without your expertise, everything's falling apart. The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a socket wrench. The business they'd stolen from me was dying without the soul they tried to remove. We'd like you to come back, Damon added, attempting sincerity but looking more like a used car salesman trying to move inventory. We could combine forces. Together we'd be unstoppable. I looked at them standing in my space, asking for my help to save the business they'd built on my work. There wasn't anger anymore, just this bone-deep exhaustion with their whole approach to life. Sorry, but I already had my own team, I told them, gesturing toward Emma who was editing footage in the corner. And my own rules. The silence that followed was more uncomfortable than a broken seat spring. They left without another word, and I never heard from them again. Meanwhile, the videos kept gaining momentum. My subscriber count hit 6 figures faster than I could process what that meant. Sponsorship offers started flooding in, tool companies, part suppliers. Even a few car manufacturers wanted me to feature their products. This time, everything would be official. Every document, every signature, every partnership agreement drafted by lawyers who charge more per hour than I used to make in a week. No more family formalities. No more handshake deals that could evaporate in a conference room. Emma helped with the business side. Her art school background surprisingly useful for marketing and brand development. She had this creative vision that made everything look professional without losing the authentic, garage-built feel that people connected with. We hired our first employee, Jake, a young mechanic fresh out of trade school who watched our videos religiously and could diagnose electrical problems like he had X-ray vision. Then came Maria, who knew more about body work than most people knew about their own families. I wasn't just hiring employees. I was collecting a team of dreamers, people as crazy about craftsmanship as I was. Young, hungry, with fire in their eyes and grease under their fingernails. We operated like a band building an empire from scratch, each person bringing their own skills and passion to the mix. Jake could make any electrical system sing opera. Maria could make rust-eaten metal look like it had just rolled off the assembly line. Emma captured it all on camera with an artist's eye for detail and a storyteller's understanding of what people wanted to see. The project started getting bigger, more ambitious. A Tesla Model S that someone wanted converted to look like a 1960s Mustang. A classic Corvette that needed a complete electrical overhaul for a collector who wanted modern reliability with vintage soul. Each build became its own mini-series, documenting every step from initial concept to final test drive. The audience grew with each project, people following along like they were watching their favorite TV show. Major automotive magazines started calling. Car and Driver wanted to do a feature. Motor Trend was interested in a cover story. Jay Leno's people reached out about a possible appearance on his show. That last one made me stop and think. Jay Leno, the guy who'd built an empire around his passion for cars and comedy. If he was interested in what we were doing, maybe we'd actually built something worth noticing. 6 months after that first viral video, I was standing in the hangar looking at what we created. Professional lighting rigs, organized workstations, a small office area where Emma handled the business side. 3 cars in various stages of restoration, each one representing thousands of hours of work and hundreds of thousands of views. This wasn't just repair work anymore. This was my philosophy, my signature, my name on everything we touched. Each project carried the Alex's Customs brand, and that brand meant something to people around the world. Mr. Bo would stop by most evenings, coffee in hand, to check on progress and share stories about his own working days. He'd watch Jake troubleshoot an electrical problem or Maria blend body filler, like she was creating sculpture, and you could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "You built something real here, son," he told me one evening while we watched the sunset through the hangar doors. "Something that matters. Your grandfather would be proud." Late at night, after the crew had gone home and Emma was editing the day's footage, I'd walk through the hangar and marvel at how far we'd come. From sleeping above a Mexican restaurant to running a business that employed people, inspired others, and generated enough revenue to plan for serious expansion. But this was just the beginning, the foundation. The real show was still ahead. Every completed project felt like a small victory, but I knew we were building towards something bigger. The YouTube channel was a platform, but the real goal was changing how people thought about restoration, about creativity, about the intersection of old craftsmanship and new technology. We weren't just fixing cars. We were proving that innovation could come from anywhere, that passion could override formal education, and that sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to stay down when life knocked you flat. The American dream was supposed to be about working hard and building something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, I'd learned that the dream wasn't just about success. It was about doing it on your own terms, with people you trusted, creating something that would outlast the quarterly reports and family meetings. My workshop smelled like possibility now, instead of just gasoline and grease. And that smell was attracting attention from places I'd never imagined. My grandpa always said, "Don't be afraid to experiment." Alex. Even if it's crazy, it might just change the world. I listened to him, and the world changed, at least my world did. The genius move or completely insane idea, depending on who you asked, was launching my retro-electric car line, combining classic American muscle with cutting-edge electric technology. Every bolt, every wire was part of my vision, not someone else's orders. This was everything Grandpa taught me about not just fixing things, but creating them, art, technology, and so wrapped up in horsepower and heritage. Alex's Customs wasn't just a business anymore. It was a philosophy on 4 wheels. The money started flowing faster than I could count it. Millions of dollars is nice, sure, but the feeling of doing what you love on your own terms? That's priceless. Forbes wanted to interview me. Prestigious auto shows started sending invitations with my name in gold lettering. I became a millionaire, but I was still the same Texas kid who got excited about engine sounds. I remember one high-end car show where I was wearing this expensive suit, playing the part of a successful businessman, when I heard a weird noise coming from one of the display cars. Without thinking, I rolled up my sleeves and crawled under that machine right there on the show floor. Everyone around me started laughing, but not in a mean way. They got it. This was who I was, suit or no suit. Success attracts all kinds of attention, including the kind you never wanted in the first place. One evening at my new, fancy office. Yeah, I had an actual office now with leather chairs and everything. They showed up again. Dad and Damon walked through my doors looking smaller somehow, like life had been using them for batting practice. Their business had completely collapsed. Everything they'd stolen from me had crumbled without the passion that actually made it work. They weren't there to demand anything this time. They were there to beg, looking at Dad, who seemed to have shrunk in the wash, and Damon, who for the first time in his life looked genuinely lost. I felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a weird kind of peace. I thanked them, not for betrayal, but for showing me who I really was when everything got stripped away. Well, guys, I told them, Benson Customs doesn't exist anymore. But here at Alex's Customs, I can offer you positions as entry-level mechanics. Hard work. You be working under my supervision. Those are the only terms available. Dad's pride kicked in immediately. He shook his head and walked out, back straight, probably thinking he'd rather starve than work for his son. Damon hesitated, looked around at what I'd built, and after a long moment, nodded his acceptance. That wasn't triumph over them. It was triumph over the part of me that had been carrying around their judgment for years. Watching Damon learn to follow instead of trying to lead taught both of us things about humility and second chances. Then came the call that changed everything. Jay Leno's people wanted me on the show. From raccoons in the alley to millions of viewers watching late-night television, Jay Leno represented something uniquely American. The idea that passion and humor could build an empire, that loving what you do was more important than just making money from it. Sitting across from Jay, confident and calm, I told my story about hands that smelled like gasoline and dreams that started in a Texas barn, about sleeping above a Mexican restaurant where my neighbor probably got better rest than I did, about how life can knock you sideways and then hand you opportunities you never saw coming. I demonstrated the retro-electric cars, answered questions about the technology, shared the philosophy behind combining old-school craftsmanship with new-world innovation. The audience loved it, but then I saw something in the front row that made the whole journey worth it. A few faces I recognized, former colleagues who used to smile condescendingly when they thought I wasn't looking. Their expressions were pale, filled with something between amazement and regret. This wasn't just my success. This was success for everyone who'd ever been betrayed but refused to stay broken. The best part about the whole experience? Emma was in the green room watching everything on the monitor, that same artistic eye that had first seen potential in a rusted-out Mustang, now seeing her partner succeeding on national television. After the show, walking back to the hotel through Los Angeles traffic, she grabbed my hand and said something I'll never forget. The best cars are the ones that take you home to real happiness. And you know what? I'm grateful they betrayed me. If they hadn't, I'd probably still be working for them instead of building something that belonged completely to me. Maybe I'd still be fixing lawn mowers for weekend warriors instead of creating electric muscle cars for collectors worldwide. The best life lessons are the ones that hurt while they're happening, but they're the ones that show you what you're really made of. My story isn't just about cars or business or even revenge. It's about how betrayal can become the catalyst for success if you're willing to do the work. How loving what you do can be the only constant when everything else falls apart. Emma became my business partner, my muse, and eventually my wife. She taught me that innovation comes from seeing beauty in broken things, that art and engineering aren't opposites but dance partners, and that the most important engine you can tune is your own heart. These days, Alex's Customs employs 50 people who share the same passion for bringing dead machines back to life. We've got a waiting list that stretches into next year, contract with major manufacturers, and a YouTube channel that's taught millions of people that you can always start over. Mr. Bo still stops by the shop, though we've moved to a much bigger facility. He brings coffee and stories, watches the young mechanics learn their trade, and reminds me that giving someone a chance to prove themselves is one of the most American things you can do. The hangar where it all began is now a museum piece, not literally, but in my heart. I keep the lights on in the old hangar, not because I worked there, but because that's where I found who I was. That's where I learned that space to grow matters less than the fire in your belly, that the right mentor can change your trajectory, and that documenting your journey can inspire others to start their own. So never stop dreaming, even if your dreams smell like gasoline at first and electricity later. The American dream isn't about the money you make. It's about the freedom to build something meaningful with people who believe in your vision. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stay down when life knocks you flat. And sometimes the greatest success comes from learning that what you build with your own hands can never be taken away by family meetings or legal paperwork. That's my story. From betrayal to triumph. From sleeping above a restaurant to building an empire. From fixing other people's dreams to creating my own reality. Turns out Grandpa was right. Crazy ideas really do change the world, especially when you build them bolt by bolt.